that's, in a way, that's the origin of the Managing Society, because he liked the idea of being a collective of activists, not just being a lone wolf. People working together could be much more oomphy and have an effect than working alone. And so, but to put it on a homosexual footing, wow. So in a way for him to be able to, he wasn't the only one who was very daring and was trying to do that. And you can find ways to actually be very daring if you want to be. It's a strange world. Most of the folks identifying as homosexuals are just very frightened people, only living in the shadows of life. Even when they're more able to integrate their love, let's call it love life, and even there that's a kind of compartmentalizing of homosexuality. To call it merely oneself, other people who want gay marriage, for example, as if that's what this kind of amorousness amounts to spiritually. It's not so, in my opinion. It's not the same thing. It's different. The quality is different of the same sex relating to each other in an intimate way, no matter what the intimacy is. There's a different quality to it on account of differences between the biologies of the two genders. There are two genders, so on occasion, you know, folks who have inobvious genders, and so on and so forth, anomalies like that to occur. Of course, there's a two-gender system, has evolved for life on Earth from, what, a billion years ago, I don't know exactly how long it's been now, that life has existed as two genders, basically. And it's an anomaly for a gender to be interested in its own self, and we see many kinds of creatures do that. But for humans, when humans are interested in it, it's a human thing. We may want to categorize it as something in its own little compartment called sex, in quotes, but it's not so. You see, and that's why one of the first results was called Men Loving Men, a Gay Sex Guide and Consciousness Book. Not just a sex guide. As the introduction will explain, maybe I'll read the introduction to it's not very long. Will explain, it happened because I walked in a damn stupid little bookstore, and this is, believe it or not, was thought liberal at the time. There was a book on the shelf called The Joy of Sex. And this was thought amazingly progressive. It had to go to again, threats with the Supreme Court and all this level of stuff that resulted back in the 60s, the later 60s. There was a series of lawsuits and decisions paving the way, saying basically that the government no longer could stick its nose in the mail. It was controlling what people read technically through the mail. Its control over the mail, and this was eventually disallowed. And one of the first results of it was this large mass market book called The Joy of Sex, which purported to describe in intimate detail the actions, the actual the things that went into actually doing human sexuality. Nothing, not even a peep on homosexuality. Nothing. Not even a reference to homosexuals in a book called The Joy of Sex. Nothing. Not even a mention. Nothing. And this is in the 70s, okay, already. How awful that is. And so, dealing with it as it's coming overtly on that kind of level is what all kind of LGBT rights is all about, all that kind of level of struggle, sociologically based, at that level of oppression and injustice is really great. And simultaneously, as you know, for any of you who worked in trying to do that or be an activist in that kind of way, it builds up being more connected with who you are to do those kinds of things. It just inevitably is structured to have that kind of effect, because unlike other kinds of movements, you're kind of born into a kind of system, the family system, that is based on a breeding philosophy, and a breeding intelligence, and a breeding and a mentality that's about breeding. And we've been produced by that even. And I want to suggest to you it's such a powerful, I mean this in the creative sense, powerful contradiction that act has created a kind of being that is really fully engaged with the experience of desire as sexual, as that's romantic and has important meaning and interest, both to oneself as the having that wish, and also the object of the interest, having it back even. So now we're going to talk about mutual wishing, and how really yummy that can be, how exciting that can be. And when we look at it as persons rather than creating babies, now notice that this is, mentality is accrued now to what we call democracy, what we call everyone. But it was not so originally. It was not so originally for people. There's been an awful lot of struggle in evolution to get to this particular point right now and be able to get more into things in any way that has any real substance about being homosexual, rather than be murdered and silenced. That's been the fashion for a long time, is to just silence all this stuff. So already I thought it was really important to have something that was trying to be about consciousness as well as sex itself, as well as the mechanics. To also be about something that is not just in addition to the mechanics. But I myself was still growing around understanding this stuff. Okay, it's not like I suddenly leapt from someone who could be just so closeted, and even before closeted, just super repressed and hating myself and trying to fit in. And just being a regular person. I wasn't active. I was always, as a human being, an activist, but I always had to repress being gay. These are always folks. Often I was not the only person who was like that, of course, in such situations. You know, when I was coming up, so to speak, when I was a young kid, well, it was just the expected of one. It was not thought to be important to be homosexual. There was no importance in it, meaning there was no significance in it. There was no substance in it. There was nothing in it. That's not what I found out once I began to not just stick with the things that were coming to me in my own head that were saying, just hate it. Just simply hate it because that's the way it is. You just hate it. That's the way it is. Your parents hated it, your grandparents hated it, your culture hates it, your religion hates it, everything hates it, supposedly. And that's all there is. That's not only a lie, okay, that's all there is. That's not only a lie, but worse. It prevented me personally from discovering otherwise, and thus developing and becoming a more meaningful human being as homosexual. As not, I'm creeping around, or I'm doing something on the side, you know, in terms of trying to satisfy those desires. That's where I began to discover, and it was a process, it took some years. I began to discover that it wasn't simply another kind of sex. I had to kind of know it. I had to get into it, okay? And so this book is an early stage. This later book, Visionary Love, is more advanced, but still early. It's still an early stage in this process that has led us to support these club meetings. And by the way, sorry, I get a little hoarse from having to speak a little loud, but I might amend Roger's comment here a little bit about the purpose of the club meetings to also be vis-a-vis the purpose of why I have an institute, you know, which he was trying to articulate. I want to compliment him for trying to do that, because that's awfully hard to do, this kind of stuff. But I want to say this in particular, like about the meetings here. I think it's real important to have a kind of public space in which not only gayness is honored, okay, but gayness trying to be aware of itself, trying to have a relationship with itself. This may or may not sound odd, okay, but I'm suggesting that that's actually real important to try and get a handle on that, to try and actually practice that. Okay, so I took that seriously personally. If I wasn't personally going to oppose my own homosexuality anymore, then it was going to have to be a teacher. I was going to have to learn to be homosexual, because I'd only been an enemy. To my own homosexuality, I'd been an enemy. I mean, I tried to kill my own heart, not knowing any better. Is that stupid or what? I don't know what I would call myself, but it was pretty unfortunate, because I paid this guy a lot of money. This therapist I went to become straight. He was a very distinguished man. Believe it or not, it was like $60. It's like in 1969. It's like $60. Whoa! I some and some and some, and I tried to date this. After I turned 18, I felt I could control my own life. And so when I went to college, I simultaneously saw this very distinguished man. I'm sure he's dead now. Dead! Dead as a doorknob! He had a very distinguished office in West Hollywood, which I would visit every damn week! Starting when I began college. Okay, and my purpose was very clear with him. It was to become straight. It was to learn to be straight and expunge not only being gay, which I had not been gay to that point, but any interest or desire. This man was honored by my challenge. I was willing to pay him money for this challenge that he thought was so honorable, and together we entered on that pursuit. Which included a whole program. I dated girls, fellow students in school. Poor things, I feel sorry. In the end I wanted to apologize to them. I really was using them. At the behest of my therapist. What an introduction to this stuff, right? As I mentioned, I've been interested and met my first therapist and therapy experience when I was 13, but it didn't pan out in a way that was regular until I was 18. Because I decided I had to more seriously engage this stuff once I turned 18, and this is what I did. And I did it in a way that simultaneously I was learning about psychology by practicing it, so I'm not going to be a hypocrite like many people turn out, as you know, to be. They say one thing but do another. Fuck that. If it's anything that's real, it's something I'm going to have to live myself first and foremost, and see by my own life, by my own existence. So that already interested me, at least as you know from my explanations. Intellectually speaking, from the age I was 13, but by the age of 18, not only intellectually was I interested in trying to get the practice in, trying to have the practice, but actually succeeding now. And so in that way it was great, even though it was about getting rid of my homosexuality. It was the ostensible purpose that I had with this fellow, who technically called himself a neo-Freudian, an ego psychologist, which was an area of psychoanalytic expertise that was big at the time. He was a professor at UCLA at the time, and so on and so forth. I don't remember his name offhand. But woof! It was a big deal the day I went in there, by the way, if you want some interesting background to where these stupid, but looks like just a damn book, where something like this comes from. I'm dead serious about this. I could finger where it came from lots of different ways, but here's an interesting story for you. That I was in therapy with this man for almost 2 years, as I described to you. I began to be suspicious after a while because I started to have these kind of passionate feelings for this fellow guy in school, and I just didn't want to feel icky about that anymore. And there's no reason for that. It wasn't the guy was responding, the other boy in school was responding, or anyone was responding in a more affirmative way. Something in me got tired, I don't know how to describe this, of just ragging on that witch. Only taking a view that was hostile to homosexual desire and uber critical to a decimating point that robbed it of all legitimization and so on. Something in me kind of gave. I don't know when I don't know. Falling in love is the right way to describe it. This guy who was very, at the best, also very homo-hating and closeted and so on and so forth.